an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Broadchurch, Season 1, Episode 7. In this episode, well, it seems like there's been a major break in the case that doesn't happen until the last 2 seconds of the episode, in which I want to scream and throw things because I have to wait to watch the next one. Guys, I'm dying. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. I just wanted to mention, I realized that I don't feel like I've covered many mysteries for this podcast. Oh, BT Dubs, I'm sorry. Thank you to Paul for commissioning this episode. And also thank you to Paul for bearing with me when I had to push back the recording. I've covered things that have mysterious elements. And there have been like some books that have murders and you're like waiting to find out who killed them or whatever. But it's never really felt like those were the main event. This is a real mystery series. And I feel like that's the first one. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so the anticipation of just wanting to watch the next one is really acute. Oh my God. So this episode was loaded with information, with giant reveals. It was fucking jam-packed. And the major one that I'm going to talk about, first of all, we find out exactly what's going on with Alec. It turns out that he has a heart arrhythmia. And he's basically in such bad shape that if he is eligible for a surgery and they don't even know if he would be able to survive the surgery. So that's the kind of delicate we're talking about. And Ellie is none too pleased with him. When he comes back to consciousness and she is sitting by his bed, she has a stone-faced expression. She's not doing that, oh my God, are you okay? Kind of thing with her face. She's just like, oh good, you're awake, you fucking liar. I can't fucking believe you do this. Here are the frozen grapes. I hope you choke to death, you piece of shit. And I was honestly really delighted by this so much. She's fun. So she rails at him for taking on this job. He begs her to not tell anybody. But as we see, the people who work at this hospital don't take privacy super seriously. And there are also people who eavesdrop a lot. And so the information does wind up getting out. And he has to decide how he's going to control it. And what he does is he tells them the whole story of what really went down with Sandbrook. And we find out, I'm just going to jump right into it. We find out that evidence was lost due to one of his inspectors stopping off for a drink at a hotel. Their car was broken into, and this pendant, which was sort of the smoking gun that was going to get this guy thrown in jail, was stolen. And he's pretty clear that the theft wasn't related to the case. He does not seem to think that they broke in looking for this pendant in order to keep the guy from getting in trouble. This person was just breaking into cars, and they happened to pick one that was carrying something that was basically priceless. And so he wound up taking the blame because it happened on his watch that this crucial piece of evidence disappeared, despite the fact that it was not his fault. And the reason he decided to take the blame for it is because it was his wife. She was having an affair, and he knew that his daughter would be really upset to hear what was going on, and he didn't want her to find out. So he decided to take the blame himself and let her keep her illusions about who her mother is. This is one of those things where, on the one hand, I understand the impulse and I admire it. On the other hand, I'm like, I feel like your daughter knows already. You know, like I don't actually know that, but kids just know, like, she's not that young either, I don't think. The way that he calls her later on, Sandbrook's been like, what, a year ago, 2 years ago? I feel like she has to be in her early teens. And I don't know, I just feel like he's probably sacrificed a lot here in order to save her from knowledge that she may have already. Because, I mean, it's perfectly possible she was already aware of the affair before he was. I know that's what happened with me and my parents. So I can't help but wonder if maybe that was a pointless gesture, although I do understand the impulse. And also, it's the kind of thing where maybe he's saying, I didn't want my daughter to find that out about her mother. And that sounds noble, but it might not be that simple. It might also be that he had some pride around the issue. And yet, taking the fall, he had to sacrifice his pride, you know? So, I don't know, it's a different type of pride, though, isn't it? Than something as personal as, like, it just becoming well known around town that your wife was cheating on you. So, I don't know. But I think that he's telling them the truth. And I think that he did the best he could. It's just tragic knowing that this fucking murderer is out there now due to somebody just wanting to get their dick wet, so to speak. So, I'm really enjoying the reveal on this. It feels so, it's just really surprising and very simple. I thought the whole thing with Sandbrook was going to be this incredibly convoluted series of events. And instead it's really straightforward and just, it's understandable how out of hand probably the reporting on it got. And it also, it's another instance of the news doing their best to get information out there, but just not really getting it right, which is a common theme in general, but especially in this show. That, like, maybe they get the broad strokes right, and you, like, are tempted to be like, yeah, but is it better to get the broad strokes right, but be wrong in the ways that matter? Or is it best to just get whatever information out to the public that you can? And I don't really know the answer to that. Part of me feels like I don't know that the public necessarily deserves certain information. Like, why do they get to know anything? Some things might not be for them, and that's fine. Because, you know, there are instances where you're talking about, like, voting, where people have the right to know so that they know what they're voting for. But when you're talking about a murder case, the public getting to know certain things isn't actually going to help, I wouldn't think. So that, to me, is sort of a different issue. Then you start getting into, like, the public deserves to know. Well, why, though? Why do they? Because maybe they don't, actually. So, anyway, that's the big reveal with him. So, let's back up here. We have a pretty great moment where Ellie is going back up to the what do you call it? Hut. And they are checking the slope and everything. They are, you know, the person at the end of the last episode, somebody had broken in here, and that was the person that they were trying to catch when Alec basically had his heart attack. So they are investigating as much as they can to try and get any more clues about this person, and we wind up finding out that they are a size 10 men's shoe, which is the same size Nige is. I tend to think that person was Nigel. does seem a little easy at this point for it to have been Nigel, but I'm getting a vibe off him that's just unsettling, and I can't tell how much of that is because maybe he's a murderer and how much of it is just because he's, like, not super balanced. I don't know. But we go from this scene of their, like, you know, continuing to sweep the hut to Ellie, and she's doing another one of those meets with everybody. And it is such a marked difference. I love this scene. She's standing in front of everyone, and previously she was just, like, sort of mumbling and stuttering and unsure of herself, and there was a real sense to her of, like, I don't really know why you guys should even be, like, listening to me, but I got shoved up here, so I'll tell you, like, what you should do, like, the best I can, but, like, I shouldn't be the one up, I shouldn't be, and here she's like, Frank, go through our list of people of interest, those with no alibis or questionable alibis on the night of Danny's death. Knock on their doors, find out their movements from last night. The likelihood is the killer was there. We were very close. They are rattled, and they will make more mistakes. We have Susan Wright in custody. We've connected her to the site where Danny's body was found. I'm continuing to question her, but time is running out before we have to apply for an extension. I know this may sound daft, but we need to find her dog, Vince. Nish has a picture. The dog is a priority. She's very attached to it, and I think it would help her to talk. Uniform have turned up nothing so far. Now, you probably know the boss was taken ill last night during the pursuit. I don't know when he'll be back, but we carry on. Do not get distracted. Our duty is still to the Latimer family. End of. It's beautiful. She's just, like, completely blossomed, and she's fucking given orders, and she's talking with certainty. There's no pauses for breath. She goes up there knowing exactly what she's going to say, and not because she's planned it out, but because this is what needs doing, and she's just telling them what needs doing. And it's just such a lovely moment of growth. I really enjoyed this, and it's just unconscious on her part, and that's how that sort of thing happens a lot of the time. When you begin to get experience under your belt, and you begin to take a leadership position, it's not even like you're doing it because now you've, you know, crossed the threshold like in a video game and you're like, oh, I've leveled up and now I get to be in charge. No, you just start to realize I know more than the people around me about this in particular. So I am going to explain to them and I will oversee because I know and they don't. And it's just simple. And I just enjoy seeing somebody just begin to, like, fall into leadership that they didn't intend or even necessarily want. When she talks later to Alec, she says that she wouldn't want his job anymore. Like, she was really mad when it turned out her promotion had been given to somebody else. But at this point, she's, like, looking at it and realizing she doesn't really want it anymore. Until, of course, he tries to say that it's good that she's figured out where her level is and she should stick with something that's, like, within her abilities. And then she gets really salty about it, which I think is just him doing a little bit of reverse psychology. I don't think he even means that. He knows it's going to fucking irritate her, and that's the only reason that he says it. Meanwhile, he's getting the fuck up out of bed and just leaving, despite the fact that the hospital is telling him that he really shouldn't. And that is the theme for him this whole episode, is everybody is telling him that he is not okay, and he isn't interested. He is super committed to getting this done before he fucking dies. And so he's treating it as if they have no time left, as if everybody is on the same schedule as him, and saying, you know, time's running out. And Ellie has to be like, for you, but not for everybody else. She just has to keep reminding him that, like, yeah, I know that it feels that way to you, but you have to remember you probably shouldn't have even been on this case in the first place, which I really do appreciate. Pardon me, I'm going to take a sip of water. My mouth is drying out like a bone. So yeah, I really, this scene where he's like, he sort of stumbles into the office and, like, bites off the little bracelet from the hospital in the hallway while he's talking to her. Oh my God, this was so funny. And they all look at him as he comes in, and it's really clear everybody knows that he is not okay. He's, like, breathing hard and sort of woozy and shit. It's just, he's not all right. And he keeps having these flashbacks to Danny and this other little boy Do we know who the other little boy is? Are we familiar with them? And there was a little girl in the memory that he had when he was still unconscious, but she doesn't appear in this flash that he has right here. And I'm wondering, like, the murderer that he was dealing with before, I know that there was there was a little girl who was killed. But this second little boy, is that his boy? I thought he only had a daughter. Like, I feel like there's more going on here than I knew, or I missed a piece of information, perhaps. Might be that simple. So, yeah, he he says that he's not leaving until this is solved. And when he's asked, why did you take this job when you knew you were this ill? It just basically fades out. And he doesn't, like, I don't know what he says to her, but we know why. He feels like he owes. And maybe he does. Maybe he does. I don't know. So they bring in Susan to question her. And this whole thing with Susan is frankly wild. Guys. Basically, boiling it down, she was married to a pedophilic abuser, murderer. And he was raping her oldest daughter, tried to rape the youngest. The oldest got in his way and he killed her. He tried to tell her that their daughter ran off. And she had her suspicions, but it wasn't until like the neighbors began to talk that there was an investigation launched. And when he was arrested, he told the cops that she knew what was going on. And this becomes sort of a thing where Ellie obviously has a major problem with Susan claiming that she didn't know. And this is, I really, really love this a lot, because this is the sort of thing that I can believe in both directions. And what I mean by that is, I have no doubt that in a lot of cases, people definitely don't know. People are very willing to believe that if they think they know somebody, or if they're close to a person, that they have a good grasp on what that person is capable of. And I just never really think that's true. There's like one or two people in my life that I'm very confident I know what they're capable of. And in both of those cases, I am confident that they are capable of murder in the right circumstances. So I would never be able to just like rule out anything. And it's in your house. This isn't even, we're not even talking about somebody that like, oh, it's my best friend. I had no idea. You share a home with both the victim and the abuser. This is one of those where I'm like, I have to agree with others who are like, how could you not know? This is a situation in which it feels like the signs had to be there and you chose not to see them. Which is what Ellie comes back to a little bit later, is just saying, like, how could you possibly have not known? And it's interesting when she says that at the very end, once they, like, release Susan from custody, Susan sort of smirks at her in this way that suggests that either she's heard that a million times and, oh, wow, whoop-de-doo, you're fucking saying the same shit I've always heard. There's a sense of that, but also, I can't help but think, Susan may know something, and she might be laughing behind her hand at Ellie, because something's going on with her own son. And I don't know how much Susan can know about that, but the more this episode continues on, the clearer it becomes that Ellie has decided to sort of bury her head in the sand regarding something about her son and his friendship with Danny. Because what happens in this episode, the end of the last one, left off with Tommy bashing his fucking computer into smithereens with a rock in the woods. And Father Paul stumbles across him and is like, yo, dude, what the fuck? Takes the computer, and this episode, he hands it over to Alec. Now, when he talks to Alec, he says, I don't think they were such close friends. The last time they were, like, interacting, it was him beating the hell out of Danny, and he's a lot bigger than him. So I had to split them up. And, you know, we heard Tom say to Chloe that he hated Danny and that he's glad Danny is dead. So what the fuck? And Paul says that he told Ellie about that fight. But when Alec brings it up to her, she behaves as if she has never heard anything about this. There's almost a suggestion to her that, like, Alec is just asking in order to bait her, instead of maybe he's just asking because he got some information that you didn't share with him. She lashes out right away. And it's really interesting later because, like, in this moment, she says to Alec herself, this is what you do. You get backed into a corner and then you lash out. But it's hilarious because that's exactly what she's doing, and she doesn't seem to see that. And that's what winds up happening later with her husband. Alex says, why don't you get your kid's computer and bring it in here? He doesn't tell her that he already has custody of it. He just wants her to, like, begin to put it together that maybe she doesn't know everything that's going on in her own home. And she goes home, looks for it, can't find it, and then lashes out at her husband very clearly because she is upset at the fact that there is something else happening under her own roof that she didn't know about. And it's sort of pointing out her hypocrisy in trying to, like, point a finger at Susan and be like, how could you possibly not know? And then she comes home and finds out that there's all this shit happening related to Danny that she thought she had a grip on, and it turns out maybe not. So I really love that. This is something that I'm sure comes up a lot in, like, police investigations. It's just the concept of denial or just self-delusion. It might not even be denial because it sometimes denial is, for me, the implication there is that deep in your heart you know the truth. But self-delusion is like a little bit more nebulous and abstract, where it's like, I don't have a good explanation for this, so I'm going to tell myself a story about what this is probably about. And that story will be what I keep running to every time some behavior doesn't quite add up. It's not necessarily denial because there's not a particular, like, theory or hypothesis behind what's happening. It's more, well, that's weird. Maybe it's this. And then you run with that. So they are obviously very closely related, delusion and denial. But I find delusion to be something that's, it's almost like an attempt to make sense of things. Whereas denial is, I don't care about making sense of things. That's super duper not a priority to me right now, you know? So yeah, this is just, I'm fascinated by this whole concept because it's left up to the viewer to decide whether or not we believe that Susan knew or didn't know what was happening to her daughter. There's no way to know for sure. All we know is what she says, which is that she didn't know. And when she says it, I believe that she thinks that. I'm not sure I believe that's the truth, you know? In the end, it doesn't matter, because her daughter's fucking dead either way, and it's horrifying. And her husband, he hung himself in jail. He got, like, sentenced to life. Hung himself after less than a year in jail. And what we find out as the episode continues is that Nigel is her son. She was pregnant during the whole incident and wound up having her kid taken away because they didn't think that she was a fit mother after what she had supposedly allowed to happen to her daughter. So they take her kid away, put him into foster care. And then eventually laws were changed so that she was able to track down Nigel and find out where he was. Because previously, the children's identities were like shielded so that parents couldn't find them again. For their own safety, I'm sure. But when she came to try and tell Nigel that he was her son, he, first of all, evidently wasn't even aware that he was adopted, that's a real kicker for me, is to just hide something of that magnitude with a kid who is at this point a full-grown man. Like, Nigel's what, 28, 30? Like, this is long past when you should have broken the news to a kid. Jesus Christ. So that's traumatic enough. And then there's the added concern that she has, which is, what if being a psychopath is fucking genetic and my son is the son of a murderous pedophile who was a mother and he is capable of the same things? What if he has this in his blood? So when she eventually tells what I think is the real story, or as close to the real story as we're going to get, to Ellie, about how she saw Nigel putting Danny's body on the beach, Ellie expresses some surprise at the fact that a mother would basically like narc on her own kid like this, and says, I would do anything I could to protect my son. And Susan replies, I am protecting him, because for like what he had for a father, what is he potentially capable of? And I really, really liked that line a lot. That was one of those lines that, like, it's the kind of thing that I feel like could sound really sort of, there's the whole nature versus nurture argument, and you can get into some pretty fraught territory where you start behaving as if people aren't responsible for their own choices or whatever. But she is trying to sort of make up for something that she feels she's responsible for, which is her daughter's death. And I'm not mad at her for deciding that this was the one time that she could actually do something. It's just so understandable to me that you get into a place where you just circled around and around. Could I have done something? Could I have done anything? And finally, you're presented with what looks like a second chance. And yeah, maybe you can do something. I can't help but sympathize with this, like, even if it's not genetic, I don't know. It's just, I feel really bad because it turns out too, we get like an explanation about why she has been so antagonistic with the police. And that was my main question this whole time. You guys know, I couldn't understand why somebody would do what I would consider the exact opposite of what's smart. If she's trying to get their attention off her, it felt to me like she was doing the precisely wrong thing. She was behaving in such a suspicious manner that I was just like, how do you think they're not going to continue to like look at you after you have just slammed the door in their face? This is not the kind of behavior that an innocent person would engage in. So it felt to me like, why is she drawing more attention on herself by acting like this? And then it turns out that she feels the police, in the investigation of her husband, basically twisted everything that she said and centered the blame on her in such a way that she wound up getting her child taken away from her, which right there, yikes. And everybody around her thought that she was like in on it somehow. And that, in addition to everything else, is really, that's salt in the wound. So basically what it comes down to is she just doesn't trust cops, period. And frankly, in that, she and I really have something in common. It just never occurred to me when, in her dealings here, that her lack of trust was due to feeling like personally victimized, because there was a sense to her, especially after what she said to Maggie, which was like, I know men who would rape you. She threatens her in such a way that it sounded to me like she was part of a bigger conspiracy. And I had a whole theory about like drug running. I still can't help but think like there's something there that's like larger, a bigger picture situation. So I thought that she was just being antagonistic because the police were getting a little bit too close to her personal business on this. But instead, it's much, much more personal than business. And I think that's a great way to go with this. It makes me sympathize a lot more with her just feelings of like, you know what? Fuck all you guys. Fuck you. Fuck your family. Like, she's just so sick of this and being caught in the middle of this kind of shit. And not only was it regarding her husband and family the first time, but now it's like beginning to involve her son. It's yet like a repeat of everything. Oh man, brutal. So, and I want to mention too, I said before about how Ellie has really come into her own. And that is super true in this interview process as well. I loved watching Ellie and how much of a hard ass she becomes when she's talking to this woman. Because it's really clear she has no fucking time anymore for playing around. This, like, Susan's just doing a whole bunch of like, well, I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. He pointed a crossbow at me, but I can't remember why. She does all of this obfuscation, and Ellie is so over it. And straight up tells her, if you don't fucking cooperate, I am going to find your dog and I am going to have it put down. Really, honestly, that was super boss. I'm not even trying to be like, you know, that was, I'm not trying to advocate for the death of animals or using animals as leverage against people. But this is a very different Ellie than we saw in the first couple of episodes. You know, she is really hardening a little bit. And it's not in a way that makes her seem like she's not so jaded or anything. But she isn't going to put up with any bullshit either. And it's very clear from the smugness of Susan's attitude initially that Susan is trying to be cute with her, you know? I feel like I wish Alec had been there to see this because he would have been proud of her, I think. Unfortunately, Ellie sort of tells Susan that she won't spill the beans on who Nigel's family is. And unbeknownst to her, Alec has gone and talked to Nigel and given him a full fucking file on everything about his family and all of the like newspaper clippings and everything. And yikes, dude. I don't know, like, Alec claims that he did that in order to try and gain Nigel's trust. I'm not sure that really, like, holds water with me. It feels like he was just being fucking petty. It feels like he was just like, you know what, fuck you, dude. I'm gonna, like, lay some real bad news on you just because I don't fucking like you. And I need to put you off balance. So here's some really fucked up family history. Enjoy. You know, it just, the idea of I'm trying to gain his trust, that felt like he was lying a bit. I don't know. So I just, and the actress who plays Susan, and she's talking about seeing Danny's body on the beach and saying, I wondered if my girl looked that peaceful after he killed her. I don't think she did. And her face just begins to sort of crumple, but there's also a very distant look, and she just fucking kills this scene. Oh man. So then we go to the scene where Maggie is getting word that the DI has like broken out of the hospital basically and is continuing this thing. And they decide that they are going to hound him and figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, Alec is beginning to panic because, as he puts it, he's running out of time. So he goes and finds the psychic and is like, whatever you've got for me, tell me. I'll take anything at this point. Word? I mean, no offense, dude, but like, I would really be like, you know what, go fuck yourself. I wouldn't, but it would be so tempting. And I'm trying to remember what this guy's name is. He says, I've been trying to tell you I got a message from him. It was someone he knew. It was someone close to home. And that's pretty much all he's got. Alex is like, well, what does that mean? Is that like geographically close? Friends? Family? What? And this guy just says, I don't know. Just don't ignore it. And Alex says, prove to me you're not a bullshitter. And he's like, I did. And I told you about it. About the pendant. And when Alex says, well, what does that mean? This dude is like, I think that you know what it means. I can tell from the way that you're reacting. You know exactly what it means. You're wanting me to explain it to you. I don't know what it means. It's not for me. That's not the point. And he says, I also got from you that you've been here before. This is particularly interesting. He has been here before. Is that what the other little boy is? Was that supposed to be him, perhaps, as a little boy? What is that about? And Alec at first just says, what? And this guy stops and realizes that he sort of hit on something here. And says, oh, shit, you have been here before, haven't you? How does it feel having to eat humble pie? And Alec just gets very irritated and walks away. And this guy stands there looking fucking smug as hell. And honestly, I don't blame him one single solitary bit. You earned that smugness, my friend. So we get then getting the story out of him about what actually happened with the pendant. And then we go to a beautiful scene that I really loved with Beth and Mark and Father Paul. Now, I have said previously that I do not think that Father Paul is involved in this. I really don't. That being said, if he is, I'm going to be so bummed. I want Father Paul to just be a good dude. I really want him to. If they decide to make him be involved, I accept this, because they are very good at constructing a story. So far this season, I have not been disappointed, so I trust these writers. But I just gotta say it now. If he turns out to be involved, I'll be bummed the fuck out. I really will. I just don't want that, man. I just don't want that. So, there. I said it. It's been said. And this scene, what I thought was so beautiful about it, is, and this is one of those things where you have like a moment of realization, and you ever like start getting an idea about something and you really are feeling yourself a little bit. You're like, oh wow, why hasn't anybody thought of doing this yet? This is a really good idea. And then when you really step back, you're like, oh my God, it's this. I can't believe I didn't realize that this is what I'm thinking of. A thing that not only already exists, but is very well known. I was talking to some, I posted about this on Facebook a couple of years ago, where I am somebody who's much more into savory food than in sweets. And also, I have trouble with like, I always like hot food over cold, usually. And so the answer to people who are trying to eat healthy is always like, make a smoothie. And I was saying to somebody how I really wish that there were more savory smoothies instead of sweet, because I'm not really into that. And also that smoothies are a little too cold, and maybe we should have like hot smoothies. And then before I knew it, I realized that I was talking about soup. I just wanted a bowl of soup. But it took me like circling around to get to it. So all of this to say, I was thinking the other day about how all couples should have like a third party present when they argue. So like a neutral party who can be like, yeah, but see, you're having this tone with her and I can see why she's getting pissed at you. And then I realized like that's what couples counseling is, basically. It's a third party who is not actually invested in your argument, out like watching from the outside and mitigating the damage of both of you getting into the same patterns in your arguments that you always do, and pointing out to you some of the ways in which maybe you're hitting below the belt, or you're not hearing the other person, or you're repeating something like that already has been established. Or in this case, Mark keeps interrupting Beth. And what she's struggling with is that she has decided at the end of the last episode to keep the baby. And yet, despite coming to that decision, and it seems feeling at peace with it, she isn't sure how to handle being pregnant right now. It's just, as she puts it, her heart is so full of Danny, and there isn't room for anything else. And Mark keeps like chiming in, trying to say there will be, you will, and finally she snaps on him and tells him to stop telling her how she's going to feel. Which leads to this beautiful moment, like later on, where he interrupts yet again and immediately apologizes in one of those moments that's progress. That she says something about how I can't let Danny go, and he says nobody's telling you to, and then immediately sorry, and like takes a deep breath and says, it's difficult, I'm sorry, you talk. That is one of those moments where I feel like there's hope for a couple when one of them, it's been pointed out that they have this particular behavior, and the other seems to really realize it and internalize, okay, they're right, I do keep interrupting. Shit. Okay. I mean, there is nothing quite like the moment that you realize something about yourself in that way. And it's like, you know, this is something that happens with podcasting as well. And it's like, obviously a very different thing, but somebody will point out like, you say such and such all the time. And then once you begin to edit it, you're like, oh my God, that's all I say over and over again. Oh my God. And that is what it can be like as a couple, except in a much deeper sense, where they're like, yeah, you always act like this. And you have to stop and be like, oh my God, I definitely do act like that. Shit, you know? So for me, this moment was just, it's huge growth for both of them to be reaching out for help in the first place. I love the bargaining that Beth is doing, talking about all of the things that she would endure in order to make sure that Danny was safe again. I'd be left for dead. I'd have a gang of men on me be tortured if it meant that Danny was safe. And Mark, like, Paul asks him, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, we just need some answers, don't we? Some help. You have a line to the big man. Why don't you ask him? And I love Paul's like sort of humorless laugh when he says that. Earlier, what they both said was that they didn't really want a lot of like religion involved in what Paul says to them. But then it's Mark that initiates like, what does God say, you know? And Paul says, yeah, he says, we're drowning here. Just want it done, don't we? This is Mark. When we met, she was 15, just Beth. She was just beautiful. And basically, she was so sunny all the time. And her life with me has sort of destroyed her, and she isn't the same person anymore. That girl is gone. And I keep thinking about how much better your life might have been if you hadn't met me. And she says this isn't on you, but there's a real sense to Mark of like, I fucking ruined your life. Like, he really seems to feel that when he's saying it. I feel like this line could have fallen flat with a different delivery. It could have made me feel like, dude, this isn't about you. Can you not? But something about the way that he says it, I was just like, oh, honey, babe, no, that's not it, you know? So Paul says, can I say something? This child is a gift, and you may not want it yet, but go for the scan and see how you feel, because God has sent this to you, and while you may not agree, perhaps the help that he is sending isn't what you want, but it's what you need. And then later, we see a scene of the two of them at the scan, and both of them looking really hopeful and really smiling to one another. And that's something that I've really appreciated about this show. They are showing us the tragedy and the complete destruction of a murder like this on the family and on the community. But then they show us these sparks of hope. They ensure that there is a sense of life goes on, and not in a bleak, like, well, there's just the endless march to death sort of thing. It's a genuine sense of like a bright future despite the horror of what you're currently going through. And I really appreciate that. It works, in my opinion, to leaven the darkness of what's happening. And it does so in a way that doesn't feel artificial. It's all still tinged with sadness. It doesn't feel like they're just forgetting about what's happening to them. It's more like they are having a moment of happiness despite themselves. You know, they think that they don't want this, and I completely understand that. It's sort of like the opposite of what Chloe was engaging with, where she was specifically going to a place to be happy despite what's happening because she feels like she's not allowed to just forget. And they're having a sort of thing where they're like, I don't want to embrace happiness. I don't want to do that because that means that I'm like betraying the memory of. And then they're being forced a little bit to like get past it for their own sake and for the sake of the child that's coming. And I don't know, I really appreciated that. So let's see. Oh my God, you guys. Okay. Let's talk about that fucking phone call that Nigel makes to Mark, because this is really something. Nige says, I want you to hear this from me. The police have taken me in, and you're my phone call. They think I had something to do with Danny. And it's all wrong. You know that. And Mark says, I'll see you when you're done. You don't have to worry about anything. Just tell him the truth and stay strong. And he says, all right, I have to go. And he's saying this and his voice is breaking and he's sounding like he's going to cry. But then he hangs up the phone and he walks away and he gets this smirk on his face. And you guys, I cannot decide what to think about this character. I would like a little input from the audience on this, to be honest. Did any of you have a bit of a problem with this actor having an expression on his face in certain scenes that doesn't seem to match what's going on? I can't tell if that's a choice, if he's just not a great actor, or if we are supposed to notice that his face doesn't seem to match what he's saying, and that is supposed to be an indicator that all is not well. Because the scene later on where he's basically waiting for Susan in her trailer and he threatens to like gut her dog, he's smiling as he says it, even though he's got like his voice is making him sound angry and desperate, but his face doesn't match. And this moment, basically what I'm saying is most of the scenes with Nigel, he's got a weird sort of smirky smile going on. He feels like a real Theon Greyjoy in that way. And I just can't decide if that's a choice or if this guy isn't that good. And it's distracting because of the fact that I can't tell if that's meant to be on purpose or not. So this moment where he's walking away from his phone call and he's smirking, I was like, is he though? Or is that just what his face does? I couldn't tell if I was supposed to be noticing how, like, desperate he sounded when he was talking to Mark, and then he turns away from the phone and suddenly he's fine. Or if just... I just don't know. Cheryl says, I never liked that character, especially after he threatened the dog with a crossbow. I mean, fuck, definitely. Oh, I should have mentioned that too, because, like, I thought we were definitely going to find out that dog was dead at the beginning of this episode, and I was really relieved that he had not hurt the dog. Jesse says he also has really big teeth, and I feel like he always has a sneer on his face. A sneer. That's a good word. Yeah, smirk or a sneer. It's like between those two all the time. So I don't know. I go back and forth on whether or not this is a choice, or if this is just like, because there are people like that whose face just seems like when it's at rest to go into a certain type of expression. And sometimes it can be almost like they're laughing to themselves. I've met people like this before, and at first you sort of think, like, are they being an asshole? Like, it'll feel like they're being sarcastic with you when they're being sincere, because they don't realize that their face does something other than sincerity when they're saying something. And then you begin to understand who they are as a person, and you get it, and you're like, oh, okay, that's what's happening here. And I just couldn't tell with Nigel if that was what's going on, or if he's a bad actor. Because, like, everybody else on this show is so excellent that if he is a bad actor, I'm puzzled as to why he was even cast, because obviously they knew what they were doing casting everybody else. Everyone else in this feels like they are who they are. And Nigel is the one that I'm just like, I don't really get you, dude. And I can't tell, again, that may be because he's the murderer. I don't know. But there's obviously something incredibly sketchy that's going on with him, because we wind up finding out a couple of things. First, it turns out that he was the one who put Danny's body on the beach. So, if that is so, and if the boat that he burned was the one that he used, which it seems as if it was Oliver's family boat, it makes a lot of sense to me that Nigel would burn it, because Nigel does not strike me as a very smart person. And choosing to immediately torch something feels like the kind of impetuous, not well thought out plan that he would come up with, you know? That said, him actually killing Danny, that is like an extra step. Him being involved, that I can see. And by involved, I mean, like I said, I don't consider him a very smart person. And I could see him getting mixed up in something, and getting Danny mixed up in something that is a bit above both their heads, but he isn't smart enough to be able to see that right away. So maybe I could see him being like, you want to earn a little money, kid, and we'll do this thing. Danny's like, yeah, I do want some money. They get into it, and then he starts to be like, well, this isn't what he thinks that things should be going a different way. They're in over their head. Danny gets killed, and it's really his responsibility that he got Danny into this in the first place. But he wasn't the one that killed Danny exactly. He just put him in the position where he was surrounded by bad people. That is sort of what I see for Nigel. The thing is, though, the shoe size matches, and Danny had a grown man's handprint around his throat. And that feels awfully damning. I don't know who else could be involved, because at this point, unless it's like Father Paul, there is nobody else that we have met on this show that I think it would make an impact if it were them. Do you get what I mean? And this is the key, I think, to writing a good mystery, is you need to position people. If you want readers to really like have a response to your big reveal, you need to position people in such a way that you know everyone well enough that the reveal of who actually committed the murder in the end has a bit of a gut punch to you, because you've grown attached to either the character themselves and you've like grown to like them and you're realizing, oh my God, I was so wrong. How could I have been so wrong? Or alternatively, you can grow attached to your hatred of another character that you really want to have been the one who did it, because you want them in jail because they suck and they're a bad person. And so you have this like idea that you can't let go of. It's sort of a similar thing to like what happens if you're not a good cop. You know, you get really attached to the concept that so-and-so did it because you just decided that. And then you begin to change everything to sort of fit that narrative. Nigel's the only person that I feel strongly enough about, other than Paul, that I would really like feel a way about it if he were the one who did it. And it's not really because I'm attached to Nigel so much as I know what he means to Mark and how much that would just not only destroy Mark, but Mark has said something just this episode about how, what would Beth's life be like if he wasn't in it? And Nigel has sort of come into Beth's life because of him and his work. So that's the thing that bums me out, is that he's like blaming himself already. And if it does turn out to be his friend, that's going to be a problem. I feel like that's no good, you know? Let's see. Cheryl says, similar to Kat blaming Tyrion for Bran. I'm not sure what you're comparing that to. Sorry. I've lost track of what I was saying there for a second, so forgive me. That's not on you, Cheryl. I talk a lot, and now I've like circled around, I think, too far before noticing your comments, so now I can't remember what you're relating that to. Similar to Kat blaming... oh, you mean like we grew attached to Tyrion, and so... or Kat decided that she wants Tyrion to be the one that's guilty because she just doesn't like him. Is that what you're saying? That's one of my favorite things, to be honest, is like in mysteries, the one person that you wish had did it, or when everybody had a reason to kill somebody. That's one of my favorite tropes, because everybody hated this person, or they were just, you know, really rich and everybody stood to gain. Picking a suspect and sticking to it despite no evidence. Yeah. Okay. Got you. Yeah. So in this interview, like I said, he's lying and not keeping track of his lies. He's not even good at the lies. And like I was saying about like the weird expression on his face, when he's arguing with, Alec, there's like a weird smiliness, even when he's like snarling and angry. He's just got a weird, unsettling face that I don't like, and it bothers me. I told her to leave me alone, but she wouldn't. She started harassing me. And he acts like he had no idea why she started harassing him, but we know that she told him who she was. So again, he's just not thinking through his lies at all, you know? And in the end, what Alec decides to do is release both of them and watch what they do. And eventually, of course, this idiot decides that he is going to go over to Susan's place, and he waits for her in the trailer and tells her that unless she disappears, he is going to gut her dog while she sleeps. I should mention too, I had theorized that maybe she didn't like actually give a shit about her dog, because she just says, "Where's my dog?" and there's no like affection, and she doesn't even call the dog by name. It does seem like now she does care about her dog, but it's hard for me to know, because she's such an odd duck with so much baggage that I'm like, she may just not relate to her pet the way I'm used to people relating. When he says, "I will gut this dog whilst you sleep," again, it almost looks like he's grinning. I don't understand. It's just not, I don't buy it. I don't know. And she says, "If I go I'm not coming back. We'll never see each other again. I can do that. And when she says I can do that, I can't tell if she means like I can truly disappear or what. I think that's what she means. But she's saying like we'll never see each other again. Like he's going to be bothered by that. And I'm like, he wants you gone. You're not hearing him. And he says, you contact the police and tell them you made a mistake. It wasn't me you saw. And then you go. I love this because this is us getting confirmation she was telling the truth. Otherwise, I wouldn't be totally sure, you know? But him basically telling her, change your story. It's a great way to confirm to us that, oh yeah, she was fucking honest with them about it. And she says something about how he's the spit of her husband. And it was you I saw. And he just like leaves the trailer, and then we see her with her dog and a suitcase a little bit later. And she's literally walking out of town. They're supposed to be keeping them from traveling. So I can't imagine how far she can possibly get. And then we have the final scene where the Latimer family is having dinner with Chloe's boyfriend. And he gives them a like stuffy, I think, for the baby. And it's obvious, like, he sort of put his foot in it here. They were having a nice time. And then he did something about how he brought the memory of Danny, like the specter of him, back into the fold, you know? And this moment, they're worried about Nigel. Chloe says, it won't be him, Dad. And her boyfriend says, Chloe's right. It can't be Nige. Him and Dan really got on. I saw it every time we went out. And both Beth and Mark stop and go, went out. And he says, catching animals. They'd come up to the farm and then we'd go out from there, late evenings. Nige said it was all right. And Danny said it was okay. Nige said you knew. And Mark says, no, we didn't know. And we cut from there to a brief moment with Ellie being told by Alec that something was going on with her son, asking where the computer is, her looking for it. And then Alec looking at his computer, and apparently he's able to access some of the files that had been it's email transcripts. And he says, of course, shit, in a way that he sounds like this should have occurred to me. And there's just sort of a montage of everybody lying awake, not knowing what's going to happen next, not knowing really what to do. And that's the end of the episode. And you guys, I am dying to know what the fucking email transcript said. I am dying to know. I'm so excited that I get to watch this, right away. Oh, I'm so excited. So that is the end of the episode. I really liked this one. This one was just, it was a good time. Nigel notwithstanding, because I don't understand him. Rosalie says, his threat about her dog reminded me of her threat about knowing rapists. Maybe we're meant to think this family just has innate emotional regulation issues. Maybe. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like maybe she's in some weird fucking other circles. I don't know. I don't understand how she's able to just skip town. This is not a large town. They should not be having trouble keeping track of her. But who knows? Maybe the next episode will open and they'll she was trying to skip town, but we caught her. Or maybe she's going to kill herself. I don't think she'd bring her dog with her, though. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right, I have to wrap this up. But thank you again so much to Paul for commissioning this episode, and to all of you for bearing with me having to reschedule everything. I hope that you're enjoying the coverage. I'm really enjoying the show. Reminder, there isn't another episode booked past April, and there's a really long gap between March and April to begin with. So if any of you are able to commission an episode, please do. because I'm booked into May, and I really don't want there to be too long a break between episodes. It's more for my personal reasons, because it's just painful for me to go that slowly on this show, because I really like it. So if you're interested, go to unspoiledpodcast.com/shop, and you can just commission a classic Spoil Me TV episode. All right, guys, I will see you soon. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.